Have you ever heard someone whisper, in the instant before death, that they were not alone? Not in front of witnesses, not in front of family members, but ahead from them. They are here, waiting for me. That's what he said seconds before. The lethal injection went through the vein. The room was freezing cold, but no one dared to move. Two agents exchanged glances. One of them froze, his eyes fixed on an empty spot in the corner of the room, as if something or someone was there. This was no ordinary execution. It was the closing of a cycle that nobody understood, or rather, that no one had the courage to understand. The man lying there, his skin marked by cuts and symbols, was not just a man condemned to death. He was a walking mystery, a living abyss. And for years he insisted on the same story. I didn't commit the crimes alone. They were with me. They always were. But who are they? Voices, hallucinations, spirits, or something that goes beyond any rational explanation? Have you ever experienced this? That strange feeling of being watched, even when you're alone, in the room? That shadow that crosses the corner of your eye, but disappears when you try to look directly at it? He said this wasn't paranoia. Era presence, a presence that feeds on pain. And now, waiting for him on the other side of life. During the trial, he laughed. During the testimonies, he whispered phrases in unknown languages. And during his years in prison, he wrote hundreds of pages that were never completely deciphered. Texts about transient rituals, forbidden names, entities that live between spaces, things many agents tried to ignore, until one of them disappeared, and even in the face of death, even about to be erased forever, he didn't cry. He didn't pray. He didn't ask for forgiveness, just stared into the void and whispered, "They are here, waiting for me." No one dared to ask what he saw, but in the next few minutes the security cameras stopped. An unexplained blackout took over the execution wing, and when the lights came back on, something had changed. What you're about to discover now may surprise you, because this is not just the story of a man sentenced to death. It's a warning, a crack between the visible and the invisible, between what is real and what should never have been touched. Stay with me until the end. You need to see what happened after that, because maybe, just maybe, they are still here. And the most disturbing thing? That was just the first appearance. The official archives ignore it. They pretend that nothing happened after the blackout, but behind the scenes, it's a different story. Agents asking for transfer in the early hours of the morning, employees leaving everything without saying goodbye, and a lighting technician who simply disappeared. In the autopsy report, a single handwritten sentence. Final facial expression, relief, as if he had found himself again. That one who swore he was waiting. Have you ever felt like you have something watching you? It's not human. It has no face, but it's there, present, silent, persistent. If this touches you, even if it's just a shiver, write in the comments, what kept you here? A detail, an inconvenience, a strange memory. Someone who is watching this right now need to read what only you can share. Your story may be the missing piece for those trying to understand their own fear. If you felt that this video touched something inside you, like now, this gesture shows that it is worth continuing to bring to light what the world prefers to keep buried. And if you've come this far, it's not by chance. There's something in you that knows that the truth hides where no one wants to look. Subscribe to the channel. Your presence here allows this investigation to continue. She keeps alive this search for answers, for justice, for redemption. You're not here just as a spectator. You are part of it. Part of this community that feels what cannot be explained, who listens, even when the world pretends it didn't hear anything. But that night, what was on the other side has not yet been revealed, and what comes after that is even more disturbing. Don't miss it. Do you want to know what makes someone face death with that look? Not of despair, not of fear, but of certainty. The answer is not in the electric chair, nor in the cold corridor where time swallows the days in silence. It is before, well before. The house was far from the city, no neighbors nearby. One of those places where the wind seems to carry memories and screams no one heard. That's where it all began. Or, as he said during interrogation, that's where the doors were opened. 3 bodies, 2 women, 1 man. No signs of forced entry, no attempted escape. On the bathroom mirror, something written in red lipstick. The signature is complete. The researchers thought of ritual. There were symbols drawn in what appeared to be blood. Only later did the lab confirm it really was. The brands were at strategic points in the house, behind doors, under the mattress, inside a locked drawer, and in the basement, something that shouldn't be there. A painting made directly on the concrete wall. Black paint. A circle. A body with eyes wide open and hands outstretched, as if asking for something. Or received. The scene was more than a crime. It was a message, but for whom? He didn't run. I was sitting on the couch in the living room when the police arrived. He couldn't resist. He just said, while he was handcuffed, "You're late. They've already left." The expert report confirmed there were no external footprints, nor third-party fingerprints. Everything led to him, DNA, prints, timeline. The defense pleaded insanity. A psychiatric report was requested, but during the tests he looked at the expert and said, "I'm not crazy, I was just chosen." This sentence divided the team. Some believed it was strategy. Others weren't so sure. The lead psychiatrist on the case resigned 3 weeks later. It wasn't because of pressure, nor because of wear and tear. It was for something he didn't explain. But he left a single handwritten sentence in his resignation. "The problem is he doesn't lie." Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. During the trial, one thing became clear. He knew details that were never made public, things that only those who it saw, the scene up close, could describe. He reported, for example, that one of the victims was holding a necklace with a broken metal. The image was of a faceless figure. The necklace was not shown to the press, not even mentioned in public statements. Only the investigators knew. How did he know? They said he could have placed it himself, but on the police station cameras, a leaked recording shows something strange. He draws the same symbol on the basement wall, upside down, with his eyes closed, as if somebody were guiding. Some say that this symbol appears in other archived cases, abandoned houses, missing people, and a sect, almost forgotten, that spoke about bridges between worlds. This sect was extinguished in the 60s, or rather, silenced. The strangest thing, the name recorded in the official archives as the founder of the sect with the same surname share. No apparent relationship, but with the same look, frozen in an old photograph, the kind that makes you want to turn it upside down. During interrogations, he repeated the same thing. "I didn't cause this, I just opened it." And when they asked what exactly he opened, his silence was heavier than any answer. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. If all this has affected you, because what comes next is even more disturbing. He stared at the ceiling of his cell as if waiting for an answer, as if someone there was about to whisper something to him that the rest of the world would never understand. During the tests, his pulse was steady, his responses surgical. No trace of paranoia, no classic symptoms of psychosis. And that was what disarmed the experts. He wasn't incoherent. He was calm, detailed, almost convincing. The head psychiatrist at the assessment center wrote in clear, firm letters on the report, "Patient demonstrates lucidly delusional behavior." A sentence that seems to contradict itself, but in this case it was the only possible way to describe what they saw. He knew what he was saying. I knew where I was. I knew who had killed him. But he claimed that it had all been necessary. And what's more, it wasn't him who chose. Since I was 7, he said, they've been calling me. Who are they? The question echoed for weeks in the expert's report. Spirits, figures, inner voices, entities with ancient names he refused to say out loud. He would tell, with surgical calm, how he once woke up covered in mud in his grandmother's backyard, repeating phrases in a language no one could identify. How he drew symbols before he could even write his own name. How he could sense when someone was going to die. And sometimes he would be spot on with uncanny accuracy. Psychologists have reported something beyond unusual, an unsettling clarity, in recounting these experiences, as if you were giving a lecture on your own madness. But there was a brutal difference between delirium and conviction, and what he demonstrated was absolute conviction. He didn't hesitate. He did not confuse names, places, or dates. He described events with an accuracy that disturbed even the most skeptical. It was not a random construction of the mind. It was something that, to him, made sense. A type of personal truth that is not shaken by external judgment. The most disconcerting thing was the silence between the words, as if there was something he wanted to say but couldn't or shouldn't. One of the psychologists wrote that there is always a gap between what he tells and what he hides, as if he is afraid to reveal everything. And that raises a crucial point. What if he really wasn't lying? Justice wants evidence. Medicine wants patterns. But there are zones where none of this fits, where logic fails, where human behavior borders on the inexplicable. In this zone, he walked with familiarity, and he made a point of keeping others out. He said that weeks before the crime, he had spent sleepless nights. He said he could smell damp earth inside the house, that the kitchen walls seemed to breathe, that a presence stood in the corner of the room between the closet and the window, motionless, watching. And when he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of the house where the bodies were found, of the symbols, of the blood. And according to him, the dream was always the same. Someone whispered his name, and then disappeared. Investigators did indeed find drawings similar to the mirror symbols in old occult cult archives from the 1970s. But there was no direct connection, no clear link. It was as if he had access to information that the world had forgotten, or perhaps never known. This led some members of the investigation to raise an uncomfortable hypothesis. What if he was telling the truth? What if his mind wasn't sick, but connected to something we still can't explain? The doubt at this point was no longer legal. It was existential. What makes someone a monster? The absence of guilt, coldness, or the ability to act with such conviction, believing that they were accomplishing something greater? And if it really was a mission, who would have given it to them? This type of mentality, where the criminal sees himself as an instrument of something beyond, appears in few profiles. But when it does appear, it does not follow a pattern. It does not obey statistics. It defies everything that criminology tries to classify. And it confronts us with a brutal paradox. Sometimes, the true terror is not in the act, but in what motivates it. He said he never felt remorse, that he never cried for the victims, that he never asked for forgiveness, because he wasn't the one who should be sorry. When asked if he would do it all over again, he answered without blinking. If they asked, yes. And that was enough to divide the team. Some wanted him to be committed permanently. Some argued that he was indeed fully responsible. But they all agreed on one thing. There was something there that they couldn't explain. And that's when everything starts to spiral out of control. The hidden truth behind the crime was not revealed by the tests or the interrogations. It was hidden in the details, in the drawings he made by hand in his cell, in the unsigned notes left inside the library books. One of them read, "What begins in the body ends in the soul." Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because the impact of this statement goes far beyond what it seems. It's not just about crime. It's about a twisted psychological journey, decisions fueled by something that may not even be of this time. There are behind-the-scenes details here that have yet to be revealed. And when they are, they will completely change how you think. About truth, sanity, and destiny. Right there. I'm on this journey too. The reports began to emerge slowly, almost like whispers carried by the cold wind that passed through the prison bars. First, there were the noises. Sounds that didn't match anything familiar. Light footsteps, invisible scratches on the walls, muffled voices that were lost in the echo of the empty hallways. One guard, a middle-aged man with decades on the job, swore he saw a shadow move just beyond his peripheral vision. The thing was gone before he could turn his head. What remained was a silence so thick it made the skin crawl. It wasn't long before the mood changed. A second guard who had just arrived collapsed in the middle of his shift. Suicide. The note? Written in a confusing way, with crossed-out words and strange symbols in the corner of the paper. A riddle that no one could decipher. The body was found in the cell that was right next to his, the same one where the inmate had been drawing and scribbling in languages that seemed to have been extinct for millennia. It was as if that cell had a weight, a presence that suffocated the air. Shortly after, another guard disappeared. He disappeared without a trace. Searches were conducted, of course, but nothing came of it. No one heard screams or saw any suspicious movements. It was as if he had evaporated in the middle of the night, swallowed by an invisible hole. The consequence? The neighboring cells were immediately emptied. A perimeter of silence and fear was established. The prison management prohibited any direct contact with that space. Even the most hardened inmates began to avoid the corridor, whispering stories that mixed superstition and terror among themselves. Inside that cell, the prisoner wrote frantically. Words in Aramaic, ancient Latin, Koine Greek, fragments of texts that seemed to have come from forgotten grimoires, religious manuscripts, occult tomes. The letters were drawn with a hypnotic, almost ritualistic precision. Some psychologists and linguists tried to decipher the content, but few had real access. The translations were confusing, intertwined with indecipherable symbols, forming sentences that flirted with a coded message. Something he seemed to want to say but never fully delivered. Guards who spent time near the cell reported unsettling sensations. A chill that pierced their skin, a constant feeling of being watched, even inaudible, whispers that made their hearts race. The space seemed to breathe. And it wasn't just their imagination. Electronic equipment stopped working nearby. Cameras showed inexplicable interference. Was it a magnetic field, a distortion, or something even more obscure? The question that remained in the air was simple and terrible. What exactly inhabited that cell? An entity? A remnant of the past? A fragment of the prisoner's own mind, expanded to a dimension that no one could touch? Or something that escaped human understanding? A hidden truth? A fragment of reality that breaks logic? The impact of this was felt throughout the prison. The routine, once mechanical, became a game of shadows and sighs. Fear filled the corridors. The management's decisions began to be dominated by a silent urgency. Keep distance, avoid confrontation, minimize contact. But there was something more disturbing. The feeling that there, in that confined space, something was changing people's mindsets. It wasn't just its presence. It was the influence it exerted, a subtle disturbance, a slow, almost imperceptible transformation that was eroding sanity. The backstage of this prison was marked by secrets that no one dared to touch. Unexplained bans, deleted records, conversations that disappeared without leaving a trace in the files. Professionals involved in the case were quickly and silently removed, without public explanation, and those who remained began to act erratically, as if they were carrying an invisible weight. The journey inside that cell was not just physical. It was mental, spiritual. Decisions involving sanity, morality, truth, and lies were mixed together in a tangle that was difficult to untangle. The impact of that went beyond the dimension of the crime, entering the realm of mystery and the inexplicable. And it was there that the line between the real and the imaginary began to blur. Some inmates even reported that the prisoner spoke in languages that did not belong to this world, voices that were not his own, voices that came from deep, dark places in the soul. Fragments of revelations that, if understood, could shake the foundations of human understanding of life, death, and consciousness. But no one could capture these words clearly. They escaped like smoke through one's fingers. The question that remains, echoing through the cold corridors of the prison, is whether this was the fruit of one man's disturbed mind, or whether, in fact, there was a presence, a force, something that inhabited and haunted that cell, shaping events in a way that no one can explain. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what is behind these experiences goes beyond common fear. It is an invisible transformation, a profound change in the perception of reality, a mindset that challenges everything we believe is possible within the cold walls of prison. Revelations about the decisions we make when faced with the unknown, the limits of the body and mind, and the impact this has on what we call humanity. Right there. This makes sense to me. Behind the wall, hidden between the cold cement and the rust of the bars, a secret silently emerged. An old diary, a reliquary of horror and silence, was found by chance during a discreet renovation. Its yellowed pages were stained, carrying a weight that surpassed simple paper. Names, dates, indecipherable symbols, and newspaper clippings, all meticulously pasted together, as if the author had a compulsive obsession with remembering those moments. It was a list, but not just any list. It was a dark map of lives that were consumed within, 13 names marked, 11 dead, missing or taken from this world without official explanation. One still missing like a shadow that doesn't want to leave the prison grounds, and the last one on the list was alive. Each name had an invisible story, an aura of mystery that spread across the pages of that diary. Some were written in shaky handwriting, almost as if someone wanted to erase their own memory, others in strong, resolute ink, like a silent warning. The dates did not follow a logical order. Some of the dead had passed away decades ago, others recently. The interval between deaths, uncertain, nebulous. The symbols scratched next to the names seemed to try to explain something impossible, as if a hidden language were trying to reveal itself between the letters, something that had been lost in the translation of time and insanity. The newspaper clippings were fragments of a macabre puzzle, brief reports, forgotten headlines, stories that never made it into the mainstream media. Accidents, suicides, unexplained disappearances, all within the same prison in the same corridor where the diary was found. What connected these deaths? There was an invisible connection, a plot that intertwined behind the scenes of that place forgotten by the world. Who kept that list? Why did anyone feel the need to document these lost lives? The diary never revealed it, or perhaps it was unable to. The pages offered no clear answers, just an invitation to dive into the abyss of the unknown. What was behind that silent record? A warning? A curse? A hidden truth that no one wanted to face? The surname, the one that still breathed, carried an unbearable weight. Living in the shadow of death, disappearance, the absence of others. A man who knew too much, who perhaps had, made choices that condemned him to an even darker fate. The circumstances surrounding his existence were nebulous, almost unreal. Suspicions, fear, paranoia, everything was mixed together in the mind of this last survivor, who walked between life and the shadow of those who had gone. The decisions he made, or that were forced upon him, had profound implications. It wasn't just a matter of survival, but of understanding what it means to carry such a burden. The transformation that occurs when the line between life and death becomes too thin to ignore. The mindset shaped by constant pressure, by the hidden truth that threatens to pierce the veil of sanity. Meanwhile, the impact of this list reverberated beyond the walls. He questioned everything that was believed to be solid within that prison system. It revealed the flaws, the buried secrets, the silent power games that take place away from the public eye. It was a journey through the hidden face of justice, where the price of truth can be life itself. And what's more, the deaths were not mere statistics. They were echoes of intersecting stories, fragments of a distorted reality. Among these names were accounts of supernatural encounters, unexpected visits in the middle of the night, enigmatic messages left on torn notes, fragments that defy any rational explanation but that carry a weight that no one can deny. The feeling was that it was more than a diary. It was an open Pandora's box, spilling out doubts, fears, and secrets that refused to be buried. The missing person, the one who disappeared without a trace, seemed to be the key to understanding what was really happening there. Why did it disappear? Where was he taken, or rather, where was it dragged to? Nobody knows. But his name remained there, engraved like a ghost. And the last name, the most vivid of all, continues to walk through those dark corridors carrying a sentence that no one dares to name, a destiny that can extend to those who least imagine it. To you who are listening to this now, absorbing these words in the silence of your mind, now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because the list is just the beginning of a truth that goes beyond fear and death. It is a transformation that occurs behind the scenes, where reality mixes with perception, and the decisions made there can shape not just a life, but an entire existence. The impact of this goes far beyond prison, involving concepts of memory, consciousness, and what it really means to be imprisoned, not just physically, but within a mindset that imprisons the soul. The diary challenges us to question what we accept as reality and what remains hidden in the shadows of our understanding. Revelations that may seem insane or impossible, but which carry within them the weight of experience and the unknown. A journey that requires courage to look into the abyss and recognize that sometimes the abyss also looks into you. Right there. I'm on this journey too. Before you go any further, there is something you need to know. This is not common here. This material does not circulate easily. It does not appear at the top of searches. Every name mentioned, every symbol revealed, carries a weight that few are ready to bear. It's the kind of truth that transforms. Not just what you see out there, but what you come to recognize here inside. After that, nothing goes back to the way it was. If this path makes sense to you, if there is something inside you that yearns to understand what has always been covered up, stay until the end. Because what comes next, it's not just a narrative twist. It's a direct blow to your certainties. It's the kind of revelation that changes the way you see the world and yourself. This video is part of a trail that doesn't stop here. Each episode carries more layers, more questions, more discomfort. And if you've made it this far, you're already part of it. Sign up now. Not as someone who just watches, but as someone who helped keep this content alive. Because only with you here is it possible to continue exposing what so many have tried to hide. Your presence is the fuel for this investigation. It is she who allows the next truth to come to light. But pay attention. What I'm going to show you next will make you doubt even that which you thought was impossible. To doubt, stay, feel, absorb. The truth demands courage, and the next step is the densest of all, and what comes after that is even more disturbing. Don't miss it. The day of his execution arrived with a tension that seemed to pierce the cold walls of his cell. He did not want to confess. He refused any contact with what was expected, not by the chaplain, not by the guards, nor by the justice that awaited him. The words came out of his mouth like a distant, almost enigmatic whisper. I have already been acquitted, but not by humans. The air became heavy, charged with an uncomfortable silence. No one knew if it was madness, provocation, or a hidden truth buried in the shadows of the mind and the beyond. At that moment, he turned his gaze to a dark corner of the room, where no one else seemed to notice anything. The smile that appeared on his face was strange, a mixture of triumph and secrecy, as if he was seeing something that only he could see, something that played with the limits of reality. That's when the light started flashing. An irregular pattern, almost like a warning. One of the agent's eyes began to twitch, his fingers trembling in a way that seemed to have no medical or rational explanation. That little chaos inside the room seemed to be just the beginning of something bigger, a rupture that no one was prepared to face. The clock continued its heavy ticking as if it carried the fate of everyone involved. What was so different about that last moment? What was really out of control there, at that moment when life and death should have had their definitive line drawn? The truth behind this still held deep secrets, issues that went beyond human understanding. This scene is not just a passage in time. It is the clash of the human mind against something greater, a collision between the visible and the invisible, between the rational and the inexplicable. It is the final transformation, the moment when that man's mindset confronted not only death, but a revelation that could change everything. Who was really in control, and who, there, was at the mercy of forces that no protocol could contain? Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, to understand the behind the scenes of that last act, the emotional and mental journey that led to that moment, the psychological impact of facing death when one's own mind refuses to accept the official version. This internal struggle, this resistance, carries something that goes beyond fear or guilt. It is a battle against a hidden truth that defies logic. What can we learn from this resistance? What decisions were made in those final seconds that do not appear in the official reports? And most importantly, what revelations were about to emerge before everything was erased forever? These details go beyond simple execution. They reveal an emotional and spiritual complexity that few dare to acknowledge. They reveal how the impact of conviction does not end with the verdict, but continues on a dark journey that crosses the boundaries of sanity and perception. And while the world outside continues, inside that room a silent game of unknown forces unfolded, challenging the idea of justice and punishment. Comment. This makes sense to me, or write, I'm on this journey too, to show that you feel the weight of this story and want to continue exploring these mysteries. What was supposed to be a final record of the execution has become an enigma. The cameras, cold and impartial instruments, failed at precisely the most crucial moment. 10 seconds of black screen. Absolute visual silence, as if time itself had been erased. No one explains why, no one admits the error. But what those seconds conceal remains as a censored truth, a black hole in the official archive. When the images returned, the stretcher was empty, an emptiness that echoed like a silent scream. The body, which should have been there, intact or marked only by the inevitability of the end, simply disappeared. The absence of the body, an emptiness that broke all logic of protocol and absolute control of the prison, opened an abyss of doubts and suspicions. Where had he been taken? Who would have an interest in hiding the last moment of a condemned man's life? This failure was not a technical error. It was an interruption of the narrative, a manipulation of what should have been exposed, a choice to keep something hidden. Hours later, the body appeared. Not where it should be, but in a distant, hidden, almost forgotten place. The chest is marked with a burned symbol, a mark that looks more like a ritual than a signature. A silent warning, a message engraved on the flesh that does not belong to any court order, to any penal code. A symbol that carries meaning, power, and perhaps a hidden truth about what really happened. This sign, unknown to many, carries the shadow of a transformation, the passing of something that was not just a man but an emissary of a deep and disturbing secret. The journey of that body, of that censored moment, reveals much more than a simple disappearance. It speaks of decisions made in secret, of forces operating behind the scenes, of an impact that goes far beyond the physical terrain. Behind the facade of cameras, order, and the system, there is a complex web of influences and interests that do not want the truth exposed. This failure is not just technical, it is a break in the narrative, a rupture in the mentality that seeks to control history. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, explore what these flaws and symbols can reveal about the true forces at play. What was left unsaid behind the scenes of this execution, hidden among shadows and secrets? How can this mark on the chest change our perception of justice, punishment, and redemption? What impact does this revelation have on the journey of those who follow this story, in transforming a perspective that no longer accepts simplistic versions? These censored moments challenge our understanding, provoking a disquiet that forces us to question the authority of official accounts. They show us that behind the final decisions, the sentences, there is an invisible battle, a game of power and fear that shapes the truth selectively. The mark, the disappearance, the silence of the cameras, all of this is part of a larger enigma, a fundamental piece in unraveling what was really decided that day. Comment below. This makes sense to me, or write, I'm on this journey, too, if this story touched you and you want to continue unraveling these mysteries with me. The agent was not just any man. For years he maintained the routine of someone who deals with death as an employee of the system. Invisible, cold, distant. But something changed that night. Something that escaped any rational explanation. Shortly after the execution, while reviewing the videos and documents, the voices began. Whispered voices always beyond the reach of reason, but present like a weight in the silence of the cell and of the mind itself. He tried to ignore it, thinking it was fatigue, perhaps a side effect of the accumulated stress of the proximity of the end. But the voices became clearer, more insistent. They began to fill the space between his thoughts, to invade his dreams. In his nightmares, figures appeared, shadows that did not dissipate with the light of day, distorted faces that called his name. The line between reality and delirium was slowly erasing. His mind, once an impenetrable fortress, was transformed into a prison where fear took hold. The transformation was swift and silent, invisible to his colleagues, but devastating to him. The agent was no longer the same. A disturbing silence took over his days, a growing isolation that distanced him from the few connections he still had. The presence of these figures, these voices, was not a coincidence. It was a manifestation, a contact that escaped the system's control, a direct impact of what he had witnessed. 3 days later, he disappeared. He vanished out of nowhere, without a trace, leaving behind only a short, disturbing note. Now I hear them too. Simple words, but they carried an almost unbearable weight. The marked agent, consumed by something that no police protocol could explain. That sentence echoes like a muffled scream that reveals more than a mental state. It points to the existence of forces operating in the shadows that cross the boundary between reason and the inexplicable. This disappearance opens a new layer in this story. It reveals how apparently technical decisions, the execution itself, can trigger invisible, profound, and transformative effects on those who are on the margins of official history. The impact of this journey is not only on the condemned, but also on those who witness it, those who bear the burden of dealing with what should never have been seen. The agent did not disappear by chance. He is part of the backstage, a link between the hidden truth and the consequences that go beyond the physical. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. To understand how this mental transformation, this new perception of reality, alters our view of the power of the mind, the fragility of human decisions, and the complexity of the hidden truth that permeates this case. What effects can this connection with the invisible have on future decisions, on the way we understand guilt, redemption, and punishment? How does this journey of the marked agent shed light on the nuances of a story that cannot be told in a linear way, that lives in the interstices of the possible and the forbidden? This mystery is not just about what happened at the execution, but about what remains hidden in the shadows of the system, about how the real battles take place away from the public eye, between sanity and the abyss. Revelations like this challenge the traditional mindset and invite us to take a closer, more critical look at the invisible consequences of decisions that seem definitive, but that continue to echo, transform, and haunt. Comment. This makes sense to me, or write, I'm on this journey too. If you feel that this story goes beyond what it seems and you want to continue exploring this truth that insists on escaping. The agent's disappearance was not the end of the story. It was the spark that lit a silent, invisible, but devastating fire. Soon after that fateful night, other figures connected to that execution began to disappear or die under circumstances so strange that they could not simply be dismissed as coincidence. Names that previously seemed distant, almost irrelevant, began to take on a dark outline, shrouded in mystery and fatality. A growing shadow was crossing the background of this story, spreading a feeling that what had occurred had not been an isolated event, but the beginning of a macabre sequence of spiritual justices. Rational logic tries to explain, but comes up against invisible walls. The official investigation has no sustainable answers, while a dark pattern is revealing itself. People close to the convicted person, agents, investigators, even relatives of previous victims, begin to suffer fates that cannot be the result of mere chance. Deaths appear silently, strangely, always loaded with subtle symbolism, a message that seems to be left on the surface but which hides a much deeper force. A force that operates on the threshold between the physical and the spiritual. This pattern is not just a warning. It is a curse that seems to feed on pain, abandonment, and the silence imposed by those who refuse to look at the hidden truth that inhabits these events. Each loss is a piece moved on an invisible board, a macabre chess game in which the moves are made by invisible, merciless, and precise hands. The journey of these names on the list did not end with the last bang of the gavel or the turning off of the cell lights. On the contrary, they are just the beginning of a much larger plot, a transformation that goes beyond the physical body and touches the core of human decisions, of wounds that never heal. This reality changes the mindset of everyone involved. Those who live it know that there is no justice without a cost, that the hidden truth is more powerful than any sentence. The decisions made at that moment reverberate, reaching places that are unimaginable, stirring forces that go beyond common understanding. The impact of this curse is not limited to those who have left. It extends to those who remain, to those who dare to remember, to those who carry the weight of this journey. Fear becomes a constant companion, not because of the physical threat, but because of the certainty that something greater, deeper, walks among them, invisible and relentless. The curse continues, relentless. They never left. The presence of these echoes, these forces that circulate in the shadows, makes it clear that what seemed like an end was only the opening of a portal to a parallel universe, a dimension where the rules of time, life, and death become blurred, where the lines between victim and executioner blur, revealing a web of secrets, revenge, and revelations that could forever change the way we view justice and punishment. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, to understand how this sequence of events defies everything we know about cause and effect, about fate and choice, how this curse affects the mentality of those who survive, the psychological impact of carrying on their backs the weight of the inexplicable, of revelations that cannot be shared out loud, how this hidden truth hides between the fragments of disconnected stories, how the journey of these individuals intertwines in a web of mystery that goes beyond matter. This is a story that touches on our most primitive fears, with the feeling that sometimes, no matter how much we try to control fate, it follows its own path, relentless and cruel. What seemed like just an execution became a door to a universe of shadows, where the past never dies and wounds never truly heal. Each name on the list is a fundamental piece, a backstage that reveals a deeper and more disturbing truth, a revelation that can transform our view of what justice, redemption, and suffering mean. Comment below. This makes sense to me, or write, I'm on this journey too, if you feel that this story is not just a case, but a mirror of the complexity and darkness that lives within all of us. Do you really believe that all of this is just madness? That these stories of disappearances, whispering voices, and marked destinies are just the result of a tired mind, of exaggerated fear, of coincidences that insist on crossing paths? Or is there something deeper, something that escapes the eyes and common senses, something that is waiting silently, hidden in the shadows, lurking for each one of us? It is not difficult to feel, even if only for a moment, that these pieces of this macabre puzzle form a pattern that goes beyond logic, that defies reason and provokes a discomfort that cannot be dissolved with easy explanations. This strange, almost visceral sensation is not just a mere coincidence. It brings to light a hidden truth, which insists on revealing itself little by little, in fragments, like a secret buried deep within our decisions and the consequences they carry. The mentality of those who were there, who lived through these events, was changed forever. The journey of these agents, victims, and survivors does not end the moment the sentence is carried out. It continues, mutant and cruel, in a cycle that seems to spin without respite, shaping destinies and spreading an impact that no one can measure precisely. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Let's talk about what lies behind these shadows, behind the scenes where the real and the supernatural mix, creating a web of revelations that no one is prepared to face. Imagine a force that does not respect time, that manipulates the invisible threads that guide our choices and their consequences. This force is not limited to a space or a moment. It permeates lives, infiltrates minds, and leaves marks that never disappear. The weight of this secret is enormous. And for those who are part of this story, sleepless nights, nightmares, and the constant feeling of persecution become a new reality. It is at this intersection between reason and fear that the narrative becomes even more intense. It's not just about fantasies or mysterious deaths. It is a profound transformation in the perception of existence, of justice, of what we consider right or wrong. It is a truth that escapes the common gaze and hides between the lines, in decisions that seemed banal but which revealed themselves as fundamental pieces of a game of shadows. Those who thought they were in control, who believed in the power of reason and law, are sucked into this growing spiral, where nothing is what it seems, and where the only certainty is that something much bigger is at work. The uniqueness of this journey is not just in the pain or fear. You have the rare opportunity to understand what few dare to face, that the world is much more complex and darker than we admit, that the wounds of the past do not heal easily, and that the decisions we make reverberate far beyond what we imagine. This knowledge, this hidden truth, is a burden and a privilege, reserved for those who are willing to look into the abyss and recognize that the abyss also watches them. Comment below, "This makes sense to me," or write, "I'm on this journey, too." If this story is stirring something deep inside you, if you feel that these revelations can be the beginning of a real transformation, not only in understanding, but in the way we face our own decisions and the impacts they carry, if you've come this far, you've already felt it. This is not just another video. It is a distorted mirror of what they hide from us, and of what we hide from ourselves. Every breath of this plot carries more than a mystery. It loads an invitation to lucidity, to that part of the mind that few have the courage to face. If something here touched you, if an image, a sentence, a discomfort, made you think differently, then you are already in. Part of this search. Part of this silent pact for the truth. Right down there. I'm with you until the end. This sentence is not just a comment. It is a sign that you don't watch from the outside. You go through it together, and if at any time you felt that shiver or that silence that only comes when something makes too much sense to be ignored, leave a like. It is not used to feed algorithms. It serves to show that the connection exists. There is life pulsing behind the screen. Right here next door there is the next piece of this puzzle. A video that doesn't repeat itself. It goes deeper. That does not close. Exposes. Click and continue there. Because when the truth begins to emerge, stopping is impossible, and what is about to be revealed will leave marks.